Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today for this training. For anyone who doesn't know me, my name's Iris. I'm the administrative coordinator with the coalition, and I'll be filling in for Teresa Garcia, our director of training, today on this call. I will be handing it over to Linda in just a few minutes, but before we get started, I just want to let you all know that in relation to this training, we also hosted a legislative panel discussion earlier this week with special thanks to State Senators Linda Lopez and Michael Padilla and House Representatives Liz Thompson and Christine Trujillo, in which they answered some of your questions on how to best get in touch with your legislators and tips on forming those strong and lasting relationships for your programs. And so that was recorded and will be made available widely once we're done with the editing process on that. We highly recommend checking it out, as there was a lot of useful information shared in that call. And today's session is also being recorded. So if there's anything you feel like you need to revisit afterwards, that will also be shared with you. And so unless anyone has any questions for me, I will go ahead and pass it over to Linda. Linda, thanks again for being here today and for hosting this.
Happy to do it. Thank you. Glad to see so many people on. I am going to talk about the legislative process and how you can get involved. Now, those of you who were on the panel with the legislators listening to that, they gave you lots of tips about how to contact them and the best ways to do it. But I'm going to take you through the actual bill process and then where you can fit in and influence your legislators. Because one of the things that we know is, I know all of the legislators, I can talk to them, but I'm just, your representative. They really want to hear from you. And that's why it's so important that everybody engage in the legislative process. So the first thing I'm going to do is acquaint you, if you're not already acquainted, with the legislative website. Okay, there it is. Let's see if it comes up. Okay, is that everybody can see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this, I've been a lobbyist for a long time. I've lobbied for the coalition, I think, at least 15 years. So I've been through many executive directors, and Pam has been here the longest. So I applaud that. That's really great, because it's important to have longevity and consistency and history in whatever you're doing, and the legislature is the same way. Since I've been lobbying, first I started lobbying for my own agencies. I used to run health and social service agencies in the 80s, and then in 92 I started my own lobbying business. So I have known hundreds of legislators, because people leave for various reasons. They retire, they get real jobs, or since we don't pay our legislators, they for whatever reason they lose the election, and so they're out of there. So we have actually 16 new House members joining the House this year out of 70. So as I like to say, and as people really agree with, there's going to be 16 people. Actually, 2 of them have been in before, but there'll be 14 people who don't even know where the bathrooms are. And so it takes them a while to acclimate to the process, to understand what they're doing, to know when to talk and not to talk, to know what to say when they do talk, because there's all this procedure involved in the legislature. So the first thing that can really help you if you want to know what's going on, particularly during the session, is to go on the legislative website. And if you just put in your browser NM Legislature, it will pop up. And this is what you're seeing is the front page. And you'll see at the top, there are all these categories. home, legislators, legislation, committees, the publication, what's happening. Let's just click on what's happening. So today, let's see, are we at today is the 16th? What day are we at?
Linda,
Yeah.
is there any way you can make it a little bigger? Could you
Okay.
zoom in possibly?
Because it's not showing up very big.
It's a little small. I can see it. I don't know if anyone else if anyone else is having difficulty. This could be fine, but if there is a way.
If there is a way, I do not know how to do it. Do you
Is
understand?
everyone okay with this view?
Let me see. Are you on screen sharing? Let's see. Huh.
Someone said yes. It's probably fine. I just thought just in case we could make it slightly bigger, but it's coming through clear. It's not blurry or anything.
All right, let me look at this. Okay, I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, so this week the Legislative Finance Committee was meeting, and you can click on that and it will bring up the agenda, all the things they talked about. And so on the agenda, the CYFD at some point presented and talked about their budget. So if we go to home, this is where you can start so you can see what's happening. Now, the session starts on January 17th. See, that says opening day. There is a deadline for introduction of bills. So on the 30th day of a 60-day session, all the bills that are going to be heard have to be introduced. The session ends on March 18th. And then you have the period of time that the governor has to sign the pieces of legislation. Well, here's what's very important for you all, especially if you don't know who your legislator is. If you click on the legislator button, and the very first thing there is find your district by address. So you can plug in your address, and I'm going to plug mine in. I've never tried this because I know who my representative, Santa Fe. I'm going to search, and I am House District 50. Now, it doesn't tell you who House District 50 is, but it tells you you are in House District 50. So then you can go back up to legislators and let's see, let's go home again. Okay, legislators, House. Okay, here are all the House members. And they have a picture of them. Now, the key with this is 16 of these people are no longer here. But by the first week of January, they should have all the new people on. And so here is House District 50, and Matt McQueen is my representative. So this is a good way, if you don't know who your senator is, you don't know who your House member is to go to that legislator website and find your legislator by district. Another great thing about this website, and when I first started lobbying, of course, we didn't have a website. We didn't have bills online because there was no online. And if you wanted a copy of a bill, you had to go to the Capitol and go to the bill room and get a copy of the bill. If you wanted an agenda for what these hearings are when the hearings are being held and what bills are on the hearings, you had to go to the bill room and get a copy of the agenda. If you wanted to know who your legislator was, you would have to call your county clerk and give them your address so they could tell you, well, here's your rep and here's your senator. So now all of this information is absolutely, totally available online. So the committees that we see here on the left side are the actual committees that meet during the session. The committees on the right side, called interim committees, those are the committees meeting now. So we have done presentations in the past before the Health and Human Services Interim Committee, and other, sometimes the finance committees, and the Courts and Corrections committees. So these are the interim committees that meet like May through December, and they're based on topics. These are the committees on the left side that meet during the session and where the bills actually are heard. Let's go to, well, let's just pick a committee. Once you click on a committee, you're, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. There we go. Committee, let's pick the Finance Committee. So here's all the information about the Finance Committee. Here's the agenda for the Finance Committee. Here's when they met and all the list of all the handouts. So these are important to look up things. And you just sort of have to play with this, because it's not necessarily, doesn't quite flow as easily if you don't know what you're looking for. But now let's say you want to look at legislation and find out where your bill is. And let's take the example of a bill we know that's going to be introduced in the session. And it's not going to be up here, obviously. And that's some amendments and changes and updates to the Family Violence Protection Act. Now, if we knew the number, we could look it up by number. And that, of course, would only be after it's been introduced. But there are ways to look it up if we know who the sponsor is. If you don't know who the sponsor or the number is, there's the keyword lookup, or there's the subject lookup. Now, during the session, the bill locator, which I'm clicking on now, will tell us, it's a list of all the bills that have been introduced. And I'm just going to go to the 21 regular session. And here is a list of every single bill that has been introduced and where it is, what has happened to it, who is the sponsor. And all these initials tell us what committee the bill is in. Every committee has initials, and you can look and see that this bill was in the state. Can't even remember what that abbreviation is for. They changed them. Here's one for the House Appropriations Finance Committee. And these initials tell you what happened. That bill ultimately passed 60 votes to 10. And then it went to the Senate Finance Committee, where it passed 29 to 13. And this bill was signed by the governor, because this is the budget bill. So this is a way to look up and see where every bill is located and if it is actually moving through the legislative process, which we will also talk about in a few minutes. So that's how to look up legislation. You got the committees, publications. This is where we go for researching things, because many of the committees do studies and evaluations. And you can find these in the research and reports, and the LFC gives periodic reports. So that's a place just to find out general information, which you probably will never want to do. Now, this is very interesting. Now, I hope that some of you have listened to committees online. I know if you were around in your positions, you might have listened to committees during COVID when no one could go to the Capitol. And all the committees were held by Zoom. And so there were Zoom links so that those of us who wanted to testify at committees, we could go on to that Zoom link and sit in a waiting room and wait for our turn to have our 1 or 2 minute conversation with the legislators. But every single one of these committee hearings during COVID and now, and even in the past, are recorded, and they are in the webcast system. So you can, if it's going on right now, you can click on whatever is showing and you will automatically hear what's happening in the hearing. And if you want to look at something that was a month ago in the Legislative Finance Committee, you're just going to click on recordings and you can go back and find the recording of every single committee. And this goes back for years. You can go back to prior sessions and look up. But for our purposes, especially in the session that's coming up, there may be times when you want to hear a committee hearing, what's going on in that committee, like if the Family Violence Protection Act is going to be heard in that committee, then you may want to go there and listen while it's happening. So the website is really incredibly helpful, and it has all the phone numbers of all the Capitol offices. I think the governor is on here somewhere, and email addresses. This is, well, we don't want to go there. So that is our legislative website. Does anybody have any questions about how to use this? I mean, that is just a quick and dirty way to use it. And if you just play with it, I mean, the only way I've learned how to do it is just play with it and see what, where to go and what's happening. So any thoughts, questions, comments?
Hi, Linda. This is Tiffany from the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women.
Yes.
I have a question about the bill that you were just talking about, the
Family Violence Protection Act.
Right.
Yes.
Where would I go to find like when that's going to be heard and all the things that's happening with that bill?
Okay.
Like when I should be prepared to go into Santa Fe.
Right. Okay, great. So let's take that through. So we're going to, that bill has not been introduced yet. And as you can see here on the front, from January 3rd to January 13th, people can pre-file bills. And that just means they get it into the system. And then on January 17th, when the legislature starts at noon, one of the things they start doing that first week is introducing all those bills and assigning them numbers. So then we will know what the number is. And we can go in and click on find legislation by number, and it'll show up here as the 2023 session. And we put the chamber in, and it will be a Senate bill because we know Antoinette Cedillo Lopez, Senator Cedillo Lopez is going to carry that bill. So we would click in Senate, we would click in bill, and we would click in the number, and then we would do search, and the bill will pop up. Then, so we don't know a number yet. And we, of course, at the coalition, I will be tracking all these bills that are even related to domestic violence at all. And I will be letting you know, here are the bill numbers. So once we have a bill number, we would go to the daily bill locator, and we'll just look at a locator. And since the bill will be here in the long list, this was the special, one of the special sessions, so there weren't any bills. These initials tell us where the bill is. So this bill was in the House Appropriations Finance Committee, and then it was in the House Tax Revenue Committee, and there's abbreviations. The abbreviations are explained under the committees. And that's how you find out which committee the bill is in. And then you start to look for the committees. So if it's a Senate bill, the first committee is going to be the Health and Public Affairs Committee. And we would click on that. Here are the members of the committee. And those are going to change a little bit. But then we see where they meet Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 1 o'clock. And they will have the agenda placed right here. And we can see, okay, our bill, let's say it gets assigned Senate Bill number 50. We look on this agenda calendar for Senate Bill 50. And of course, I too will be sending out notices about when and where things are. So it takes some work and playing with it to figure out, but you can find it by going through all those steps.
Thank you so much, Linda. That was very helpful.
All right. Anybody else? So play around, especially once the session starts, play around a little bit with the website, and you'll be able to find things easier as you get more familiar with it. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next thing, and I'm going to share my screen on how a bill becomes a law. Here it is. Let's see. Okay. Is that any bigger?
That looks good.
Okay, all right. Okay, so let's talk about the legislature. Now, can people raise their hands if they've been up to the legislature? I'm not seeing any hands on the.
I was just there on Tuesday. Was it Tuesday, Wednesday, for the Finance Committee hearings on higher education?
Oh, good. Okay, great. And Joella, I saw your hand. You've been up there. And hopefully you all will have some opportunity to come up at this session, because, you know, we will have probably money legislation for more domestic violence money. We'll be watching for any bad bills. There may be some bills related to weapons and domestic violence that we'll follow or want to support or oppose, depending on what it is. So there will be some opportunities to come up and testify, and we'll talk a little bit in a little while about how to do that, and also to watch from the webcams. All right, just so you know a little bit about our legislature. It's all volunteer. Whoops. Well, it's all volunteer. It's 60-day session in the odd number of years, 30-day session in the even number of years. And then we have all the committees, the interim committees that meet. And, you know, it's gotten so much better, but the process is not accessible to the public. And part of that is because They meet during the day, people are working, people are taking care of their families. You know, you can't run up to the Capitol and see what they're doing, but at least now you can go on the webcam and see what we're doing. And the webcam also broadcasts the hearings of all the chambers, both the Senate chamber and the House chamber. We have 70 members in the House, as I said earlier, and 14 of them are really new, and two of them have been in before. The Senate has 42 members. They have the 4-year term, so they're not up for re-election until 2024. I'm trying to make this, okay. All right, here we go. I knew that was somewhere. All right, there are 3 types of legislation. The bill, which is used to change law. Memorials, which we use, they don't have any force of law, but we do studies with memorials, or we honor people with memorials. They're things that they're legislation that can be helpful if we want to study something. We had a memorial years ago to study batterers intervention programs. So there are all kinds of things you can do with memorials. We've gotten away from doing memorials just because a lot of times the departments are called upon to be the organizer of that study, and they don't want to do it. And we've had governors that said, I'm not going to have my staff working on any memorials. So there's less and less meaningful memorials done. But it is a piece of legislation, and it can be a House memorial or a Senate memorial, and it still has to pass one or the other chambers or both chambers, but the governor doesn't sign it. Whereas with the bill, it has to pass both chambers and the governor has to sign it. We have joint resolutions. Those are constitutional amendments. You saw on this last ballot, the last election in November, where we voted for all those new House members and for the governor, AG, Secretary of State, et cetera, we also had constitutional amendments or joint resolutions. And of course, the big one for everybody was the constitutional amendment to allow a percentage more to be taken out of the land grant permanent fund and used for early childhood and K-5 education. And that the way a joint resolution or a constitutional amendment works is it has to pass both chambers, House and Senate, and then we, the people, get to vote on it. The governor doesn't have to sign it, or the governor can't veto it. It just automatically goes on the ballot and becomes voted on by us. And honestly, very few constitutional amendments fail. If it gets that far, it's probably going to pass. So those are the 3 types of legislation that get introduced. Let's talk a little bit about the bill process. So I want to use the Family Violence Protection Act as the bill we're going to track. So first thing we do is get a sponsor. So we know that Senator Antoinette Sedillo-Lopez is the sponsor of this bill. And she goes to the Legislative Council Service, which are the year-round staff for the legislature. And if you've been to the Capitol, they are on the 4th floor of the Capitol, along with the governor's office and the lieutenant governor's office. And they are the experts. They write the bills because there's a certain statutory language procedure that every state has, and the bills have to conform with that. Once the bill is introduced, it gets a number. So we're going to pretend like, even though this says House bill, we're going to pretend like this is the Family Violence Protection Act, and it's got assigned a number, House Bill 205, introduced in the House. Then the Speaker of the House will decide which of the many committees that bill is going to go to. So it's highly likely that this bill in the House would go to the House Health Committee, Health and Social Services Committee. It would also get assigned to a second committee, and that would likely be the Judiciary Committee, because it has to do with changing some certain laws affecting criminal prosecution, etc. So the bill gets assigned to committees. It goes and is assigned, put on the list for that first committee, and that's when we start looking at the committee agendas to see if our bill is going to be up soon. That committee will hold a hearing, and they will take testimony from the expert witness. So Senator Seigle Lopez will have an expert sitting with her at a table in front of the committee members. This committee, I think, has 7 members on it. They will present to the committee. After they've presented the content of the bill to the committee, then the chair of the committee will ask the audience, okay, who in the audience supports this bill? And of course, we would want to have multiple people in the audience. This is where you have an opportunity to come and support the bill in the legislature, to stand up and say, my name is, I'm the ED or whatever of this domestic violence program, or whatever it is you're doing. And I support this bill, and here's why. Briefly, like 2 or 3 minutes explaining it. Then the other people in that committee room will get that opportunity to stand up and support the bill. Then after all that happens, then the chair will say, okay, who in the room opposes the bill? And then people will stand up and oppose the bill for whatever reason. Now, the process of an actual hearing for the bill, depending on how controversial it is, can be, 30 minutes, or it can be several hours. Because and I don't think this is going to be a super controversial bill, but on really controversial bills, you may have a line out the door where on one side of the wall are the supporters of the bill, on the other side of the wall are the opponents to the bill, and the sergeant at arms at the door will let people in as one person finishes to support or oppose the bill. Not likely to happen, as I said, on this bill, but that happens all the time on controversial bills. And the chair of the committee can also say, okay, please do not repeat yourselves. Don't say the same reasoning over and over again, because someone else has already said it. But you can say, something different. And also you can just say your name, identification, and I support the bill. And that's it. Once all the people in the audience have had a chance to support or oppose the bill, then the chair of the committee asks the committee members, do you have any questions of the expert witness and the person carrying the bill? And then the committee members ask their questions. And sometimes those questions can go on for a long time. Once all that is over, and there's no more questions from the committee members, then the chair will say, okay, I need a motion on this bill. And the motion can be a do pass, a do not pass, or a table. But we're going to pretend like our bill is getting a do pass. And so once it gets the do pass, it goes back to the whole chamber, to the whole house, gets reported out a procedural thing. And then within a period of time, it would go to the second committee, where this process goes, you just go through that same process again. Now, the time frame between the first committee and the second committee could be a week. And this is why in 60-day sessions, when there are 2,000 bills introduced, I don't think we'll have that many this time, but in past years, we've had thousands of bills introduced. And if you don't get your bill in early enough to have time to go through the first committee, the second committee, and then pass the first chamber, and then go over to the second chamber and do that all over again, you're not going to get your bill passed, even though everybody was supporting it. So it's very important we try to get our bills in early so they have a better chance. Once the second committee does the due pass, then it goes to the whole House, and the House votes on it. And once the House votes to support it, it goes over to the Senate. Now, the bill is the same bill. It's the same House Bill 204. It gets introduced into the Senate, read out. Now, here's what happens in between the House and the Senate. They like to have enough bills from both chambers cross over to the other chamber so that they feel like their bills are being heard in the other chamber. So if our bill passed out of the House in the first 2 weeks and went over to the Senate, that first committee in the Senate is not going to hear it for a while, because they want to get some Senate bills out of the Senate and over to the House. So there's all kinds of maneuvering and politics and all of that involved. But it has to go through the exact same process, the committee, get our witnesses, do testimony, listen to the questions from the legislators, and then hopefully get a due pass, where it's reported back to the Senate, goes to the second committee, goes through the whole process. Then it goes to the whole Senate for their passage. And if they pass it, then it goes to the governor for signature. So here's the governor. Here's House Bill 205. Most of the bills that pass in any legislative session get to the governor in the last two weeks, maybe, no, not usually, mostly in the last 2 weeks, because of that whole process of the Senate won't hear bills till the House has heard their bills, and vice versa and all that. So the governor then, if the bill gets to the governor during the legislative session, before the last 3 days of the session, then she would have 3 days to sign it. So she can't hold that bill for very long if it gets there before the last 3 days. Now, if it gets to her in the last 3 days, then she has 20 days to sign it from whenever the session ends, from the date the session ends. So it's good to get your bills to the governor's office before the last 3 days, if possible, so that you can, get the calls and letters into the governor, so to support her signing it. Oops. After the session ends, the governor can, if she doesn't sign the bill and she doesn't veto the bill, then it becomes a pocket veto. And there's been a lot of controversy around pocket vetoes, because really what you want, if the governor's going to veto a bill, they have to give a message. Why? I mean, the why can even be, I don't like this bill. And that's it. But they have to say something, because that's the law. 1 year, Susana Martinez, when she was the governor, she pocket vetoed about 10 Democratic bills. And she gave, and she had no message. She gave no message about why she was vetoing them. And so they took her to court, and the Supreme Court ruled those bills are law now because you did not give a reason for why you vetoed these bills. So governors now are very, they're much more careful, and they, write up a message, even if they make it up and it's not a very good reason. It's not about exactly what the reason is. It's about follow the process. The process says you have to give a reason. Okay, if the governor vetoes a bill, then the legislature can try to override it. And that requires a 2/3 majority of the House, a 2/3 majority of the Senate. It is very infrequent that a bill is overridden by the legislature. But the legislature, if she vetoes it in the last, during that 20-day period, and when the legislature is already adjourned, that can be one of the first orders of business in the next session. So like in the 24th session, where they would have a chance to override that veto. But again, this rarely happens. So once the governor signs it, it becomes the law and goes to state statute. Now, this is a process if everything goes well. But many things can happen here. Let's say in this second committee, well, let's say in this first committee of the Senate, after the bill has passed the House, it's now in the first committee of the Senate. And they put an amendment on it. Then, I think I have a slide for this. No. Okay, they put an amendment on it. Then if it passes the Senate with that amendment, it becomes House Bill 205A with amendment. And then it has to go back to the House for the House to concur on that amendment. So then again, your time frame is compressed. And if you're in the last week of the session and suddenly your House bill gets an amendment in the Senate, it passes the Senate and it's got to go back to the House to confirm that, to agree with that amendment, you could run out of time. But then there are all kinds of political things that can interfere in the process of a bill becoming a law. If I've had bills where the chair of the committee that was supposed to hear the bill would never schedule it because he didn't like the sponsor. And so it took longer to get the bill scheduled. So there's all kinds of things that can impact how your bill flows. You know, I said there are 3 things that can happen to a bill in a committee: do pass, do not pass, or table. You almost never get a do not pass. When a committee wants to kill a bill, they table it. And that's the end of the bill. You never see what happened to it. When you go back into that whole process, you go to the bill locator and you go, wow, House Bill 205 went to this committee and it's like 3 weeks now and I haven't seen what happened to it. Well, what happened to it is it got tabled, but none of that gets reported. And so none of it goes into the system and appears on the bill locator. And so you have no way of knowing unless you just call the chair of the committee and go, what happened to that bill? And they'll tell you, oh yeah, it got tabled 3 weeks ago. And really, the bills that get tabled are usually controversial bills that nobody really wants to deal with. So that's a mechanism for the legislature to just make them go away. Okay, any questions about that process? And where you all fit into the process is from our alerts and calls to action. It would be to see where your legislators are, which committees are they on? And when we see the bill coming up in the second committee in the House and you have your legislator on that committee, you can call their office. And the secretaries keep these logs of people who call the legislator's office and have a position on a bill. So the log will have your name, your address, the bill number, and a little checkbox, support, oppose, or no, or yes, whatever their form is. And they want to hear from their constituents. That's why I don't encourage like everybody in the coalition contacting one legislator, because most people will not be that legislator's constituent. And quite honestly, the people that elect them are their constituents, and that's who they want to hear from. So when we do call for actions, we would be asking you to just contact your House member or your senator or the governor to support or oppose whatever the legislation might be. So have any of you testified before in the legislature? Hand up, Tiffany.
I have not, but I have my hand up because I have a question.
Oh,
Linda.
okay, question, go.
And it's actually about that. So I did hear you say that during the time, they'll ask the audience to see if anyone supports the bill, and they'll give like 2 to 3 minutes to, I guess, give some quick talking points on why they support or oppose.
Yes.
From the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women, as you know, we do serve the 23 tribal nations of New Mexico. And so we also will be following and tracking the Family Protection Act.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking like this would be a great opportunity to get some of our members involved. Would it
Yes.
be nice to bring different of our member advocates from like different I guess different of the
Tribes, yeah.
yeah, and then how would we identify like which would be the best folks to bring in with us?
Well, that's a good question. So yes, in testifying before the committee, you don't want to limit it to people who are the constituents of the committee members. That's when you just want to bring everybody in. So it would be people would be coming from a long way. So you want to strategically decide which is the best committee, and that might depend on who the members of the committees are. And if you've got a couple of Native American committee members, they really, of course, want to hear from tribal and Pueblo representatives. So you might target that, or a legislator who may not be Native, but may have a Pueblo in their district. That would be a good time to bring someone from that Pueblo or tribal nation to that committee hearing. So it would depend on what the bill was, what committee it's in, who's on that committee, and you just weigh those factors. Plus, okay, who's going to be available this day at 2 o'clock for a committee hearing? And that brings up another issue about the legislature is on legislature time, and it has nothing to do with our time, because they can say, okay, we're going to have the Health and Public Affairs Committee hearing that's supposed to start at 2:30 every Tuesday and Thursday. And so you go up there and we're all sitting in the committee room, and they don't come off out of the chamber until 4:30. and start the committee hearing. And sometimes, particularly towards the end of the session, they really are not good with schedules. So when we have people come up, we have to say to them, okay, now the bill is scheduled for this time in this room, but it may not start on time. So be prepared to be able to stay for 3 or 4 hours if possible. And then too, you can judge who the people that might be able to come and stay, who those people are, so that you make sure you have someone there to testify. So it's a mix of many factors to figure out who should come, when they should come, etc. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Anybody else? Okay. So this is true. Laws are like sausages, it's better not to see them being made. Because lots of deals get made in these, in the legislature process that happen behind the scenes that we don't know, or that the lobbyists are privy to, but the public is not. Okay, let's talk about the budget process, because you all know that we got $4 million of expansion in this last session. And that didn't just happen. That required interim committee work and working with the governor's office and the legislative finance committee. And then we got that junior money, which is always problematic because we never know if it's really going to be recurring, even though they put it in the recurring line category. It's created some problems. But the big House Bill 2 process is a little bit different than the process we just went through for statutory bills. And so that process happens in a unique way. The legislature, through the Legislative Finance Committee, they do a budget. Now, the budget this year that we're in right now is about $8.2 billion. And, you know, to us in our state of 2.2 million people, that sounds like that's the biggest budget we've ever had in the history of New Mexico. And I mean, that is not even a tenth of the budget of Los Angeles, which has many more millions of people than we do. But for our state, it is a huge budget. And this, right now, it is anticipated that we will have $3.6 billion more dollars than the 8.2 million that we're spending right now. Now, part of the problem with that new money, as we call it, it's from gas and oil. And that is not going to be ongoing, consistent revenue forever. So we have to be very careful with not spending all that money this year or for the next fiscal year. And then in 5 years, when the production declines, we have to cut programs. And guess who are the first programs to get cut? Health and social service programs. That has been the history of budget cuts in New Mexico. So it's very important for this legislature, and they're talking a lot about it, how to increase what we need to increase as far as services to people in our state, but not spend all that money right now. So hopefully they will do that.
Linda?
So yeah.
Is that the one? So this budget for 2023, is it at 3.5 billion?
No, our
No.
budget right now for, okay, the way, so in July 1 of 2022, we call that the 23 budget. But that budget, which then ends June 30th of 2023, that budget is $8.2 billion. But that budget, more money has been coming in. And so for the next fiscal year, there's at least $3.6 billion, and there'll probably be more in addition to the 8.2. Okay. All right, so LFC does a budget and the governor does a budget. Two separate budgets. There's only a few states in the United States where there are two budgets going into a legislative session. What happens is the House Appropriations Committee starts, actually they start the week before the session actually starts, and they start hearing presentations from the governor's people and from the legislative finance people on each of the versions of the budget. And then they pick one or the other. They go, oh, well, we like the governor's budget on this item, or we like the legislator's budget on this item. And they start building House Bill 2. House Bill 2 is always the big budget bill. And in addition to picking one or picking the other, they can pick things out of one or the other and put it into the budget. So that those hearings start and they go through every single department and decide how to do that. And these committees take about 2 to 3 weeks usually to get the House Appropriations Committee, which meets every single day, to get them through the creation of the first version of House Bill 2. So when they've put all their things together, then they add whatever amendments on that particularly lobbyists and you all persuade them to do. And then they send that House Bill 2 to the House, and the House votes on it. So we're at least 3 weeks in by the time that happens in a 60-day session. So then they send the bill over to the Senate. And then it goes to the Senate Finance Committee. Now, the Senate Finance Committee has had no input into what the House was doing. So they put on their own amendments. And we often work, if we didn't get what we wanted in the House Appropriations Committee, HB2, then we try to get it in the Senate. So like even last year, the House had left out, which would be nice, left out some of the money that we were promised for domestic violence. So we had to get it back in a Senate amendment. So the Senate Finance Committee meets and puts its amendments on. I'm going to get this right once. And then they send it to the Senate and the Senate votes on it. And then it has to go back to the House. And it has to go back to the House because why? Because it has amendments on it. So it goes back to the House. With that amendment. And then the House can either concur with the Senate amendments, or they can ask the Senate to recede on those amendments, take those amendments off. Well, they never do that, and they never concur, usually. So if they did reach concurrence, that would be the end, but they don't. So a conference committee is created with members from the House, members from the Senate. They work out all the details so that everyone agrees, and then the whole bill goes back to each chamber, back to the House for concurrence, back to the Senate for concurrence, and then it can go to the governor. Now, the governor has a little more power with this bill than with a regular bill. So again, if it gets to her before the last 3 days, she has to sign or veto or line item veto. But the budget never gets to her before the last 3 days because the legislature does not want to deal with her vetoing line items and then us putting pressure on them to override those vetoes. So the bill always goes to the governor at the very end. Now the governor, so she'll have 30 days to sign or line item veto or pocket. You never pocket veto a budget. But so she can go through the budget and just take out language So let's say there's an appropriation to the homeless shelter in Albuquerque for $100,000. And she goes, oh, I don't think that the Albuquerque shelters should get it, but I want homeless programs to get it. So she can strike out Albuquerque. And then there's money for a homeless shelter of $100,000. And it would, and then the department would decide who gets it. Or she can line item entire amounts of appropriations, the language and the money. Now, Governor Lujan Grisham has not, she's done some line items, but they were not extensive. But we have had governors in the past that just, you know, line item millions and millions of dollars out of the budget. But once she line item vetoes and signs that, and usually since that budget gets to her, she'll take the full 20 days to do the line items. So that's the House Bill 2 process. And how you all can engage is, again, in the House Appropriations Committee and the Senate Committee, the Senate Finance Committee. That's where those are the only two committees that the budget goes to. Your members, we might ask you to contact your members on that committee to say, make sure this money is in the budget. Let's talk a little bit about the junior process, the junior bill. This is a fairly new thing. I think that Governor Richardson, we had 1 year before the recession that there was a junior bill, but this would be the third time in this governor's time frame, 2023, if they do it, that we would have a junior bill. And what the junior bill is, it's kind of like a pork bill. You know, you've heard capital outlay called pork. That's the money you want to get for your buildings or to buy a van or equipment, that sort of thing. And we'll talk about capital in a minute. So junior, every legislator gets a pot of money. Let's say it's going to be, the House members are going to get $300,000. Each House member, they get $300,000, and each senator, they always get more because there's less of them, so they might get $500,000. And they get to say where they want that money to go within the parameters set by the finance committees. So this year in 2022, when we got the junior money, the parameters were, it couldn't be for new programs. You couldn't start a new program with junior money, but you could fund existing things. So that's why some of you all got junior money, because we got your legislator, you got your legislator to put in some money for your program. And it's likely to have even stricter requirements if they do it in 2023. And every legislator gets that pot of money. So we're going to know early on in the session if they're going to do junior money. And I'm going to let you all know. So, but I want you to think about what are the things that you could use that's not ongoing for junior money. Because if they do this junior money, I think they've done it in pots, a recurring pot and a non-recurring pot. And even the recurring pots have not been consistent. So I think that you need to, if you want junior money, get it for something that is a one-time only shot. Don't get it for a staff person that you want to keep for the next 5 years, because it's not secure enough. And the departments are just not cooperative enough to make sure that money, even though it's supposed to be recurring, is recurring. So junior money, be thinking about it now because it is likely there's going to be junior money. And they're also talking about minimums. This year, the minimum was 50,000. And people did put in less when they had like some left. But I'm hearing the minimum might be 100,000. I don't know, because I just hear from what they're thinking about and they haven't decided. So just keep in mind the possibility of junior money. And let's talk about capital. I know we've had a work session on capital. If you're wanting capital, you've got to be talking to your legislators now about what that is, how much you need, and you have to be on your city or county's approved list. And most of you have buildings that if you're asking for capital, you're usually asking them for existing buildings that the city or the county that you're in already own. And so you've just got to go to them and make sure you're on the ICIP list and that your legislator is hearing from you about how much you know. And the problem is the capital, we never are able to get enough to do a full project. So you have to do it incrementally over a period of several years and be able to hopefully start spending the money in the first year after you've got it and build, build in sections or something. Because what happens with capital is you get money and you don't have enough to do anything. And so you get money the second year and the third year, and you need a little bit more in the fourth year, but your first year money has timed out and you have to get it reauthorized. And then they get upset because you're not finishing a project when they never gave you enough money to finish in the first place. So any questions about capital or junior? And feel free to call me, email me. Iris can put, I think you probably have my numbers, but just with any question you have in any way, I can help you. And if you're asking your legislator for junior money, let me know so I can reinforce it. Or if you've talked to your legislator and told them you want junior money, and then you want me to go to them and say, okay, don't forget to put that in. I'm there to help remind them. Okay, I think I've said all I can say. What do I have next? I forgot to do that. Okay, how do we get out of this? Stop share.
I do have a question, Linda.
Yes.
This is Kristen from the Domestic Violence Resource Center. Hi.
Hi.
Hi. So when is the appropriate time, if any, to approach these folks when they're in Santa Fe, like maybe outside of session?
Well, it's good to approach them now.
Right.
Or before the session starts on the 17th to talk about what you need, even if it's junior money or capital money or supporting more money for overall domestic violence. So now is the time. Now, when the session starts, it's possible to talk to them, but it's much harder. So if you would like to, if you want to come up and talk to your legislator, then let me know and I can help you like find them, or we can pull them off the floor if they're in the chamber, because they don't normally set up appointments in their office
Right.
during the session. So we have to look for them, and I may have a good idea of where they are or not, but
Okay. Right.
but I'm happy to help anybody find their legislator to talk. And it's going to be probably a hall room talk for 5 minutes, but
Right.
it could be very valuable.
So, and should we be prepared with some kind of a little packet, if you will, that succinctly could hand to them, succinctly outlines what we'd like?
Yes, yes. So
What does that look?
So that, I mean, we heard that from the legislators yesterday, that they really like a one pager. Okay, so what is the problem? What do you need? And make it pretty so they'll want to read it. Don't do like 6 paragraphs in 0.8 type.
Right.
Hit the high points, but yes, and make sure your name and number are on it, or contact,
Right.
Email, etc.
Great. And if I just Google ICIP, I should be able to figure out how to make sure that our entity is signed up for that, correct?
Well, just call are you county or city owned? Your building?
Owned?
Yeah, do you have something owned by the county or the city?
No, we don't. That's what we
Okay.
need.
Okay, then go to the entity that you can work with the best to try to sell them on the idea of helping you get a building. If that's what
How do
want
I?
to do.
That is. That's, I guess, what I've been struggling with.
Okay, I would, do you have a building in mind? Are you renting somewhere you want to buy?
Yeah, we're renting, and I don't have anything in mind. I've kind of gotten up against the wall with the city and the county saying that they have no buildings available.
Okay, well, I have gotten capital to build buildings, so that's always possible if you can get the land. So I would find a champion. If you're a city councilor who could be your champion, a county commissioner who could be your champion. And you know, you have to work on them to get someone who really might care and start working with them through the city or county government process.
Okay, so city councilor or a county commissioner.
Right.
Targeting. Okay.
Right, right.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Tiffany, did you have something?
Yes, Linda, I have a similar question. So the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women also rents, and it's been one of our strategic plan goals to own our own building. I heard you talk about capital outlay, and I think that was someone from DVRC have a similar question, but could the Coalition, like not maybe this year because we're not prepared to do that, maybe next year during the 30-day instead of the 60-day, could we also start preparing our coalition to propose that capital outlay for a building?
Yeah.
And how do we, like, if you have any tips how to approach or not approach, yeah, I guess approach senators with our capital outlay request, and what are your tips for like a pitch?
Okay, so are you, so where are you now?
We are on Montgomery. It is like in a suite.
So you're in Albuquerque.
Yeah, we're in Albuquerque.
Uh-huh. Okay. So you would want to work with your city councilor. Do you know who that is in that where you are?
I don't know.
Okay, that'd be, I mean, it may not be the one to work with, it could, but if you want to have a conversation offline, I'm happy to do that about planning how you could start this process and or think about, is there another nonprofit organization that you could partner with? Because you're talking about office space, or are you talking about facility space? What is that?
Yeah, so our dream is to own our own building that holds office space. It would hold event space for our organization members to gather and perhaps even hold like their own events as our members. And we're just really dreaming what that space could look like right
Okay.
now.
Okay, we can talk about it offline, but remember, the city or the county has to own the building, or a tribe has to own the building, or the state has to own the building. And because of the anti-donation clause, when we get this capital outlay money, what we get it for is our use. But the city or the county is the entity, or the state or the tribe is the entity that's going to own it. And we try to make deals with them is that when we do all the work to get the money, and the building gets built, that the services that you all provide are in lieu of rent, except for, an assessment every month to help pay for the maintenance. And I think that most of you who have city or county buildings, that's your deal. You either pay nothing or you're paying a small amount as to help the county or the city when your roof leaks and there needs to be repair.
That was really informative and I think really helpful. And thank you to everyone who came on. And like I mentioned earlier, I think it would be great for you all to check out that panel discussion that we had based on what we went over today and some of your questions. A lot of the legislators on that went over what they prefer when it comes to, introducing ideas and, all the way down to the format and what they like to see and what would be most effective. So when that does become available, I do recommend checking that out as well.
Yeah, that was a great panel discussion. Okay, well, thank you all so much, and I hope you have a good holiday, and we may be seeing you during the session.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.